guys, Eva here, and today I am doing my review for The Enchanted by Rene Denfeld. I have read this in the month of March, and this is a really short book, although it looks more short than it actually is. This is a fictional book with some magical realism in it. The author worked as a death penalty investigator for many years, so she knew what she was writing while writing this book, which is about a bunch of prisoners in this prison that are waiting for, the majority of them at least, death penalty. So you follow York. If I'm not mistaken, his name is York. York is about to get his death sentence, and he has 3 months. And at the beginning of the book, basically, the lady, and she's never named, but in my opinion, this can be a little bit autobiographic. It's just my speculation, but I think she took a lot from her work and the people she had to deal with. So at the beginning of the book, this lady who works as a death penalty investigator for this prison go and talk with York, and she says to him, I want to help you save your life, I'm going to investigate your crimes again, and I'm going to talk with your family. And York doesn't want to, so he says, don't do it, I don't want to live anymore, I want to be free, I want to be death sentence, I want to die. Then you follow another character who's never named. You're reading from his first person, and you don't know what happened, you just know that since he was a child, he is inside prisons and institutions, and now he's in death row, and you'll find out why. And then you follow a priest who's excommunicated, and he works in the prison. I don't know how that works, how an excommunicated priest can work in a prison as a priest. I don't know, but anyway, he works there, and you get to know how and why he got excommunicated. And finally, you follow also this young guy who's getting to prison for petty crime, and he is gonna have to do 2 years of sentence, but then due to corruption to a guard in the prison, he goes through some terrible experiences. Now I will tell you what I love this book, and then I will get into more details with some spoilers, but I will tell you when the spoilers start. What I loved about this book, without getting any spoilers, is first of all, the writing is poetic, is awesome. I will pick up more about her. I think she wrote about such a sensitive topic in such a beautiful, respectful and magical way. So I really appreciate the writing, and the story is dark. It gets there. It's not too graphic, but it definitely hints and gets in dark places. Some things are not explained, and yet you can imagine them. You don't need to have them spelled out for you. And the end and the way all things wrap up is just enchanted. I found this book enchanting, amazing. It was just powerful. Say that I'm kind of biased when it comes down to this book, because like I study forensic psychology. This is something that definitely interests me, like working with prisoners. Like, so it spoke with me in a special way, I guess. Like, she does a job that I would probably love doing if it was in USA. And when I say I would love to do that job, I mean it's a job that I would find really interesting and rewarding, even if it sounds weird, because as the lady says in this book, I know that these guys did horrible things, and in a way they deserve to be on death row, so they're not there the majority of cases because they're innocent, and yet I value their life because I know where they come from. So I know that to a certain degree they didn't have any choice in life. They grew up in such terrible places and with such terrible experiences that the path they took in life was almost obvious, like they never stood a chance. And I am fighting for these people who would never have anybody fighting for them, because of course they did terrible things, but I am still fighting for them because I can understand their pain and where they come from. And you'll get to know, like in the book, a little bit of the lady past as well, but she went through a rough patches herself, and she just chose another path, but there was no criminal, but she could still understand why people would go to the criminal side. I don't know if it makes sense. And that's something that I can relate to and I loved about how coming from dysfunctional families and going through horrible things doesn't mean that you choose like a path of crime. So the majority of people actually don't. The majority of people that goes through abuse in childhood, they do not end up committing crimes. But it is also true that the majority of people you find in prison have a terrible childhood abuse, whatever you can think of, it is true. So the one thing is not mutually exclusive of the other. Say that, as I said, and I repeat, and that statistically speaking, it's not like abused children go on in life and commit crime. The majority of them, 90% of them, they won't. So she says basically, like, you know, I chose differently in life, but I could still understand why they didn't. I'm still here to fight for them. I'm not gonna get them released, of course, because they're a danger for the public. I just don't want them to get killed by the state. I just want them to have life sentences, basically. As I am against death penalty, as in my opinion you don't teach people not to kill by killing them, this book is just awesome. And I will get into the spoiler section now, so be aware that it is awesome, but at the same time it's realistic. The York story, that was extremely hard and I would say beautiful is the wrong word, but powerful, I guess, to read. Basically, she finds out that York had been born from mentally impaired woman. So this beautiful girl that lived in this small town in America, she had been used by the men in the town as a sex object for years, and she had miscarriages, and then she had York. Now I don't remember exactly how that happened, but basically after York she gets a sterilization, something like that, and she has York, and she's not able to be really a mother to him. Her mental status doesn't allow her to understand what was going on. So what happens is that then man starts like abusing her and York, and he has to see the man like having sex with his mother, and then he is also abused. He's also born with syphilis, as his mother had it, so she transmitted it to him, which deformed his body and altered his mind. So he went on in life to kill women and probably rape them. It's not explicitly said what he does. It's just written down that he basically kind of became a serial killer, killing women. So when she finds out, so when the lady finds out this, she can relate to him because she also had a mentally impaired woman as a mother. She also was abused as a child as a result of that, because the mother didn't stop that from happening to herself and to like her lady, and as the mother of York never stopped the abuses because she didn't understand it. You see her speaking with a man who for a while had been living with the woman and trying to help her and York, and then one day he just left because he couldn't stand it anymore, and so you feel the guilt he has about leaving them. So that was also heartbreaking and really hard to read, like about this man and his guilt, and he's definitely guilty to just leave this little kid and this woman who clearly doesn't know better. She speaks with the sister of York's mother, and there is this part where she says, "A woman who let men come and go through her door for years to molest her baby, not out of evil, but for a reason that's harder to accept. She didn't know better." And that's one of the most powerful sentences I've ever read. And it's very true. Not in all occasions, of course. There are people who do bad things because they're evil or for many reasons which don't have a justification. But for in the case of York's mother, for example, she was not evil. She just didn't know better. She just didn't comprehend what was going on. So she let it happen, and accepting that, it's harder than maybe accepting someone as just evil. Like, you know, they could target that man, oh, that man is awful, or that woman is like an awful woman and she's evil and she does it for her own gain, or whatever. And there are plenty of people like that. But in the case of like York's mother or the lady mother, there are sometimes people who do bad things because they don't know better, and accepting that accepting ignorance as a mean to do harm, or to just let bad things happen to your child or people around you, is even harder to accept. That was one of the reasons I appreciate this book. It treated that topic as well. Like, evil things sometimes happens not because of evil people, but because people didn't know better, and it's awful. It's terrible. So this book treats the topic of how people took advantage of this woman because she didn't because she was not able to save herself, how the doctor in the town let it happen, how even her sister let it happen, and how awful is that. How can a town, or how can people do that? How can they like let people exploit this poor girl just because she didn't know any better? That was heart-wrenching to read. It was horrible how people can ignore other people, and how we can be so heartless and just turn our head in front of such awful things, where there should be someone like taking over and saying, no, that's not okay. I'm gonna help you because you don't know any better. Anyway, as I mentioned before, York has syphilis as a result of his mother having syphilis. So that kind of made his mind never work properly. He was never cured because no one ever gave a shit about him. So which leads him to abnormal behavior, and of course sexual abnormal behavior, so killing women. And then he realizes that, so he's in death row, and he says, I want to die. And the lady at the end of the day respects his point of view and says, I'm gonna let you go. I understand you not wanting to live anymore and you want to find release. Now, I'm not saying that everybody on death row is like that and everybody understands what their actions are wrong. I'm not judging it because I'm not there. I don't know real death row inmates. But in the case of York, he's being tired and just want release. It was so touching. So he knew he did horrible things. He was behind redemption, and he said, I know I'm behind redemption. I just want to go. I know that I'm not used to anybody. I know that I don't want to live in this hole in darkness forever. I'm over. I never stood a chance. I did horrible things. It's time for me to go. And that was really powerful to read about. That was definitely something that gave me the chills, at the same time make me cry. Made me almost cry. And yet he was right. Exactly what the lady said. Like, every point he made was right. He was a danger. He had no chance of redemption at that point, and he was never getting off the prison. So death was the only choice. It was hard to read about like a man who wants to die, knowing what he did and knowing that he never stood a chance because of his childhood and the illness he was born with and the mother he was born in. Also, we have the revelation of who our main protagonist is, the one where we are reading from the point of view of, which I'm not gonna tell you, but I loved it. I kind of guessed it, but I still loved it. I think it was really well done and well crafted as a plot twist. And his point of view, he's saying, I am glad there are people like the lady. I am glad I can tell the stories. We can do something to avoid men like me happening. Like, I never stood a chance for the way I was raised and then the way I was institutionalized and abused throughout all my life. But if people are more aware of that, if people like the lady fight for us and the excommunicated priests and so on, maybe one day people like me will be helped before we became like we are. So that's something that I really appreciate. Like, that's basically the main goal then, I guess, to like study these people and then help young kids and young offenders to avoid getting into this cycle of abuse. So I loved him. I loved the horses and the elements of the magical realism element in it. Even if I'm not into magical realism at all, in this one I loved it. I see it as a metaphor. I loved how raw it was, this book, in some parts. Like, for example, what happens when the inmates are injected and they die, like how they are cremated and buried and no one gives a shit basically about them. And there is a bit like where she explains these big ovens where they're put and how their body became ashes, and it was heart wrenching. Like, I almost cried reading this book, and at the same time it was, I guess, kind of realistic, and I could appreciate that a lot. I kind of like also touching dark stories, so it was definitely for me. The young kid that gets in prison for petty crime, not really petty, but just car thief or something like that, and he gets 2 years, and because of corruption he's abused by other inmates throughout this corrupted guard, which I'm sure there is corrupted guards in real prisons. Like, drugs are a problem in prison, and how drugs get into prisons and to inmates through corrupted guards, which are the worst. His story was so hard to read. Basically, he's chosen because he's a pretty boy by these inmates as their play doll, basically. So he's repeatedly raped throughout the months until he does something about it. And I'm not gonna spoil what he's gonna do, but that changes him. So at the same time you're happy because he's finally getting his revenge, but at the same time you see how that will affect him and how that will change his life and how that will probably bring him down a bad road. The book is not about really hope. It's more about how real life is, I guess, and how pain and abuse and ignorance and evilness, because there is some bit of evil in men, like the guards who are corrupted, how that shape lives and how they change lives, and how getting revenge, for example, in this case of this boy, will forever change him and will probably take him down a bad road, which will take him back to prison, maybe one day, you don't know. The book is kind of not really open-ended, but there are many things that are not answered, which can annoy somebody else, but to me this book was perfect. I gave it 5 stars. The lady and priest story was really nice. It was really real. It was touching when you learn why the priest excommunicated. His story, yes, it could have been more long and more delved into, but I didn't think it was lacking. I think it could be expanded, but it was okay. Does it make sense? It's a really weird experience when you read something so heartbreaking and yet so important that stays with you. This book will stay for me forever. I will definitely recommend it to people. It's not for everybody, but I guess it's well written enough that everybody can appreciate its depth, and I will definitely follow her works. She wrote some non-fiction as well. This book spoke to me in a way that not many books did. I find it extremely well written and extremely raw and yet noble about the topic. One thing that I took away from this book, and it's a resolution about keep doing what I'm doing with my studies and so on, because I really want to help people not becoming as the characters in this book, if it makes sense. Like, this book gave me strength, gave me motivation to do better, do more, to help. So I'm forever grateful to this book. If you've read that book, I would love to talk about it in the comments down below. Thank you for watching. If you're new, I would love to subscribe, so hit the button down below. Enjoy your day, night, depending where you are, and I'll see you next time. Ciao!